Pledge of Allegiance. If you all stand. Roll call, please.
Roger Brock,
Here.
Gene Budden,
Here.
Nathaniel Harris,
Here.
Ann Herbert,
Here.
William Hutton,
Here.
Juan Moreno,
Here.
Kimberly White,
Here.
Thomas White,
Here.
Janet Vaness,
Here.
9 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda would be the approval of the minutes from January 17th of 2017. Any questions, concerns, additions, deletions to the minutes? If not, I'd certainly entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes for
Second.
January 17, 2017.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
And do we have any old business?
There's no old business.
Thank you. In new business, the first item on our agenda will be a presentation by the Northern Indiana Commuter Transportation District. If you'd like to please come forward and, should they sign in, Brian?
Yeah, if you would just.
If you'd sign in your name and address, and also when you're done, if you could let us know your name and address.
Good evening. My name is John Parsons. I'm Vice President for Marketing and Planning with the Northern Indiana Commuter Transportation District. Let me tell you, folks, this has been a long time in coming. I mean, to get to this point where we're briefing the Plan Commission, we're excited about this. I mean, a long time is 1993 when Hammond, Munster, and the railroad got together and purchased the old Monon Corridor. It's been that long. You've got. It looks like we're gonna have a joint use since you've got the Monon Trail. We're excited about this project. We're at the sort of between the draft environmental impact statement now and the project that's required in order to receive federal funding, and the final environmental impact statement and record of decision that will finally get us to that point where we can be evaluated by the federal government in either a thumbs up or thumbs down, so we can get going with final engineering and real estate acquisition as early next year. So with just that introduction, what I wanted to do is just briefly introduce Nicole Barker. Nicole Hanley is our environmental lead and our federal liaison. She's with our office. She joined us last summer. She was formerly with the Save the Dunes Council for 6 years. She really comes with a high degree of professionalism on the environmental side, which is really important in this process, as we all know. And then I also want to introduce Kim Slaughter. Kim is with HDR. She's the project manager for HDR on this project. She's, again, comes with a wealth of experience on shepherding new start projects through the federal pipeline. And that, again, is really important in this process. So with that introduction, Kim, if you'd like to come up and brief the commission.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I think each of you has a copy of the presentation in front of you. Yes? Okay. As John mentioned, the Westlake Corridor project, you'll see it referred to as the Westlake Corridor New Starts project. New Starts refers to the federal funding pot that we're pursuing. So that's the reason for the nomenclature there. This is a 9-mile extension to the existing South Shore line to serve Hammond, Munster, and Dyer. The intent of this project is some of the reasons for the project are listed in the presentation, but one of the primary things we want to do is bring an alternative mode of travel to Northwest Indiana, to the communities of Hammond, Munster, and Dyer, to give people an option to not have to drive their car back and forth into Chicago and some of the surrounding areas. Even create an option to get on the South Shore line and go up to South Bend. It's giving people options for travel, and as well as being a catalyst for creating opportunities for economic development in the region. As you can see on the slide, that is a little bit of a timetable. We're giving you an idea of where we are in that process. As John said, since 2014, they had begun the draft environmental impact statement process that was completed as of the beginning of February, and now we're moving into what's called the final environmental impact statement, as well as we have entered a process called project development. I know that's a lot of words going on there, but so we're overlapping a federal funding process as well as an environmental process. So you'll see a lot of activity happening on these projects. We're on a fast pace to get the project towards completion. And you'll see the timeline gives you a little bit of where we're going. What we want to talk to you about today is how what the Planning Commission does feeds into that overall process. There's a slide that shows you in regards to the New Starts funding category and what are all the things that the Federal Transit Administration are looking for in our application. In September of 2017, we will submit what's called project rating information on the project. And that includes all those categories that you see in the very first column that says the individual criteria of ratings. So we'll submit information on how, what type of mobility improvements does this project provide, what are environmental benefits, as well as land use and economic development. And some of those, what is important about land use is we want to document what is the existing land use in the region, particularly around the station areas, within walking distance of the station areas. We typically look at a 1/4 mile distance as well as a 1/2 mile radius from the station locations and document what land use exists today, as well as what future plans you have for development in those areas. It is important for us to document that in order for the Federal Transit Administration to understand that the project is sustainable, that it meets your travel needs today as well as in the future. And one of the other parts of that is documenting what type of ordinances or rules and regulations that you have in place that are enforceable to encourage that development, to sustain that development, attract future development, and actually have that future development implemented. And with that, that is my presentation. On the last slide, it gives you information on how you or anyone in the neighborhood can contact us and get more information about the project. As you can see, our website is listed on here, as well as our email and contact phone number. The website will be undergoing an update here in a few days, and as we move through the future, you're going to see that we will have online community meetings on that website, as well as we will be sending out newsletters to keep the community updated. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Could you please sign in for us?
Certainly.
Kim,
Yes.
boy, and I just lost my question. It was early February was the official comment period.
February 3rd, the
February
comment
3rd.
period ended on the draft environmental impact.
So what's the process you're going through in dealing with those comments, the responses, and how does that play into the whole project?
Certainly, thank you. What we are doing at the moment is compiling every single comment that we received from various different sources. Some comments we received through the official public hearing, where people actually came to the public hearing and either wrote their comment down or verbalized their comments to the recorder. We also received some comments through email or through the mail or on the phone lines. So we are taking all of those comments and compiling them together and sorting through them, because many times people's comments are similar to each other. So we will categorize those and provide, we're developing responses to those comments. We will actually produce a document that is a summary of all the comments that we received and the responses to those comments. And it will become part of the actual final environmental impact statement.
And then you did mention that the last sheet, the contact information. So is that you're not officially taking more comments, or what is the kind of the purpose of, or what are people able to do at this point?
So, right, officially on the draft environmental impact statement, the comment period closed on February 3rd. And we have to do that because then we have to keep the project moving forward, right? And so we are taking those comments in, and we are actually looking at the comments and seeing how they can influence the design actually of the project and what final decisions we make. And so the community will actually see the impact of the comments they made in the final product that comes out later this year. What we're doing here is, of course, we're always wanting to hear from the public and what comments people may have, but more so here we're looking to, if you'd like to contact us to come out and do a presentation to a local organization or neighborhood, as well as if you'd like to join if you want to join the mailing list, is what I was thinking of. If you'd like to get on the mailing list, because we will be putting out lots of information on the project. So we want the community to stay educated on what we're doing. Yeah, in general, sorry, that I lost my train of thought on the newsletters there, but we want to get as many people as we can on the sign-ups, on the mailing list, so we can get the newsletters out to you.
And then if there are any more comments from the public or whomever, they just won't become a part of the official record?
Yeah, the FTA, it's a requirement. You have to cut it off at a certain point. They will not be part of the official record. Not that NICD won't entertain the comments, but they will not be part of the official
And
record.
that's kind of what I want to just make sure that
Yeah.
that whoever understands that. I don't want to walk away with the impression that you're not going to listen to the people
Correct.
anymore.
Correct.
And I understand there's a formal process and you had to have a cutoff date and those types of things, but there, as you know, and we've discussed before, there's a lot of stuff going on out there. People are hearing more and more things, and comments are starting to come, and I just want to make sure that we're careful that we don't give the impression that we don't care about what they think.
Most definitely not. And so we want to be out in the community as frequently as we can. Because one of the things, I think we were just talking about this earlier today, in the absence of us educating the community about what's going on and where we are in the process, others tell our story for us or create the story. And sometimes that story may not be properly aligned with where the facts are. So we want to be out there in the community as frequently as possible, making sure that we are telling the facts about where the project is and what we're doing. So if we can use this contact information as a means for coming out and speaking to groups of people and addressing their concerns directly.
The results of the public comment, you said it would be later this year. Do you have any idea when that would be available?
So officially, it comes out as part of the final environmental impact statement, which would be around September, October of this year. But we are not sure if we're going to release before that time. That it has to go through FTA's approval of the comments, and so it takes a little while to work through all of those and make sure they're in a format and responded to in a manner that FTA feels like that we have properly responded to the public's comments.
Did you seem to think you've got a fair amount of response?
We
or-
received almost 700 comments.
Okay.
So yes, we thought we were very happy with the response that we received. At the various meetings the public hearings that were held, there were almost 500, or a little over 500 attendees at the meetings. So they were very well attended, and we really appreciate the response that we've gotten from the public so far.
Board members have questions?
Mr. Chairman, I would say that there is a Pulaski Park Neighborhood Association next Tuesday that we expect to hear the same or similar discussion about what to expect in terms of the train. And also, I know that we're trying to get one in the 2nd District as well, and perhaps at Irving School again. So we're looking forward to more public outreach as part of this project.
Yeah.
information is good.
It is.
Yeah, I think also for us to kind of discuss, and Nikki, you can chime in as necessary. The RDA is also working on the transit-oriented development component of this. There have been a lot of public discussions. We actually had a public meeting last Thursday at Kenwood School. Dean and I have been pretty active with that, with the RDA. On your desk, you're going to see the layouts, options, or possibilities that were discussed at those meetings for what could be development potential around the sites. And those are the issues probably realistically is where the Plan Commission comes in, because at some point we're going to be discussing how we're going to handle it from a zoning perspective, perhaps some things coming through the Redevelopment Commission with the redevelopment district. So those are things that I want everybody to take the time to review that. Dean, I don't want to speak for you, but at our this morning's phone call, the consultant asked us to get kind of comments back to them by the end of the week. So if any of the Plan Commission members have comments about these layouts, feel free to pass them on to either Dean or myself. Let us know.
We're talking about this other set of
Yes.
pages that Brian handed out.
Yeah.
You should have received if you have any comments or preferences
Right.
based upon these.
The goal of that is to try and get a single vision for the two locations in Hammond. There will be meetings set for May that will discuss the vision, whether it is one of these options as they stand or a combination thereof. I think this is the time that we should be looking at that and making those comments. But as far as getting back to the application, can you talk about how the FTA also wants to have this TOD component in the application?
So having a plan for transit-oriented development strengthens the application. There's a segment of the application that is called the land use template. In that template is where we will document the things that I mentioned earlier. What does your existing land use look like, as well as what are your future adopted plans for land use in the city, and particularly surrounding the station locations. We will incorporate that information, and that simply increases the scoring that we'll receive on that particular part of the application. And further, the application, your score is even stronger if you can demonstrate that you have the ability to enforce zoning and other ordinances that would both encourage and or sustain the development that you have adopted in your plan.
And I think based on previous conversations we had, and then based on some of the phone call this morning, I think we need to have a better understanding of FTA's definition of adoption, because one of the concerns I have is that are we really ready to place or put the zoning district in place? And I'm not 100% convinced that in 3 months we're ready for it.
And that's okay. So there's this sliding scale of things you can put in that part of the application, right? So I'll give you an example. I've done one of these for a city before that had absolutely no zoning whatsoever,
Yeah.
So, but they wanted to talk about the fact that developers were looking at land sites and they were discussing, what could or could not be done in locations. Normally that's considered a pretty weak application, but you have to remember that is one of about 16 criterion, that are going in there. So that may have been their weak point, because they couldn't enforce that, and all they could do is hope that the development come. It's kind of the build it and they will come scenario. And you're probably a little higher on that. You have zoning in place today. There is development that happens there today. I think that we can show what was shown out in the public, what the scenarios were that were preferred by the public, document the public process that occurred. That's very important. It's the public, process that you didn't kind of do this in a vacuum and then suddenly it just came out. It's documenting that public process. And then we can just document that in the future, the city of Hammond is considering what impacts, what changes that may need to be made to the ordinances in order to, implement this. So, you just document that process.
Right.
And we'll have one more bite at the apple. So we'll have a project rating that occurs in September of 2017, but we'll also have another project rating that will occur in September of 2018. And so we'll have to submit it, update it all again in September 2018. And if you've done more at that time, then we will add what progress has been made at that time.
Right, and so the public engagement process that the RDA has been going through with the scenarios being presented to the public, while it may not be technically being adopted as a comprehensive plan amendment through the Plan Commission and the City Council, at least we can, I guess what you're saying is we can demonstrate to the FTA that public engagement was the important part.
That's right. And you came out with scenario, you talked about concepts, people understood what you were talking about. You're thinking about the future. It's a matter of demonstrating that this is something, a project that is community supported, and that the municipalities along the way are doing what they can do to help sustain that project, to support and sustain the project. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
And then just for the Plan Commission members, just one of the other attachments is showing the alternative stations, sites that are listed in the DEIS. And could you just briefly clarify, because there's preferred alternative, what does that really mean?
Okay, certainly. And so, I think I probably should give you just 2 seconds of history. There was another consultant firm that actually prepared the draft environmental impact statement, and that was a firm by the name of AECOM. And in September of 2016, NICD hired our firm, HDR, and the team of consultants that we bring with us to continue the process from to complete the final environmental impact statement and take the project on into formal engineering. So when in the DEIS, many options were considered about how the project should be aligned. And there was a commuter alternative, there was an IHB alternative, there's the Hammond option 2. There were several different options that were considered in there. And the point of those options is to find the pieces of the project that attract the highest ridership, provide the best travel time for people choosing to use the alternative mode, and that have the fewest impacts, negative impacts to the community, right? So once we've gone through that whole process and gotten the comments back from the public, you start evaluating all those different segments on cost, environmental impacts, noise and vibration, real estate impacts, and ridership. Ridership is a big factor. And we kind of try to take the most favorable pieces of those alignments and put them together to create what we call the locally preferred alternative. And it basically just means the alignment of segments that best served the purpose and need of this project.
And so that's what eventually led to the determination that the maintenance facility would be in North Hammond as opposed to be at 173rd Street. And however, that affected the two lines merging and the placement of the station and that type of thing.
That's right, all based on evaluating those alternatives, and now also taking in all the comments that have been received formally during the comment period, and we'll put before the NICD Board of Directors a locally preferred alternative. I believe it's scheduled for the March board meeting, and they will formally adopt a locally preferred alternative so that can be formally advanced to the regional long-range plan that NERC puts together.
Any other questions from,
Chairman, yes.
Yes.
On your timeline, you talk about request engineering in the spring of 2017, but yet you're doing engineering now. What request would you be making in spring of 2017?
So let's look at the top of this timeline, and this is where I'll go back into the explanation that I really kind of sped through. For the federal funding process, the Federal Transit Administration has what they call capital investment grants. And as I mentioned earlier, the grant that we're seeking for this project is called a New Starts grant. And they have these phases, defined phases of project development that you have to proceed through. And at every step, actually, to get into to a step, you kind of have to go through the mother may I's. And in order to get out of this phase and move to the next one, you have to do more mother may I's and basically prove that you are ready to move this project on to the next step. And so the first step is called project development. That's where we are today. The next phase we would move into is formally called engineering. We are doing engineering work in project development, but it's what we call preliminary engineering. More than likely, we will take it to what's considered to be a 30% design level. And so it gives a good foundation, a basis for calculating the capital construction costs of the project, for the engineering work that you need in order to complete the environmental process to get a environmental clearance on the project. Beyond that point, once we've obtained all of those clearances, we'll request that entry into formal engineering, and we'll get into further detail that leads to final design of the project. Does that answer your question, Dean?
So is this a funding step? Or
It is a funding step, yes. So the big one at the top are the funding steps. And so in that step of engineering, we will have locked in with FTA what the cost of the project is and what their share of the cost of the project is. We will begin to fine tune exactly the way the stations look and how it's placed, and we'll have final drawings on that. We'll begin to negotiate the full funding grant agreement with the Federal Transit Administration as well, and that's the contract, the actual funding contract. Oh, sorry, might be going too bit far in the weeds.
Yeah, Dean, why that request is this spring is there are trigger mechanisms that the federal government, FTA, wants to know what our plans are. Are we going to, and they want to know in advance that we're going to request enter engineering. So that's why we have to formally request that. So that way they can plan their staff and so forth, and their project management oversight consultant, get everybody in line to deal with that issue when it comes up.
Yeah.
even though that happens before the submittal for the.
Yeah,
It does, because they have very limited staff, so they hire consultants actually to supplement their staff to have the right amount of resources.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so would that happen, my understanding is there are 2 stations in Hammond.
Yes,
Okay, so would this whole component that you just discussed, would that happen for both stations, or would that just be for one, say, this is the phase 1 or phase 2?
it's for the entire project.
The
No,
entire-
you advance, you get the environmental clearance on the entire project, as well as you advance the entire project for federal funding.
Okay,
Mhm. And they all move together as one line.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. You've used the word several times, environmental. Could you tell us what that means?
Certainly. So one of the things that you have to do when you're doing capital infrastructure projects is to take them through an EPA-defined Environmental Protection Act.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, all right.
That's all I wanted to hear.
Okay.
Keep it on.
Yeah.
Any other questions from board members? Revisiting something that you had mentioned a little earlier, you are available for like a service club to come out and talk?
Yes, we are. We would welcome any recommendations, because we would like to reach a broad base of the community. And that's one of the things that we're hoping that you all may be able to help us with as well, is to make some suggestions of various organizations or community groups that we can go out and speak to, is we want to make sure that as many members of the community as possible understand what is being done and how it may or may not impact them.
So size is not
Not at all.
totally relevant then?
Not at all.
And this website and email is where we'd be reaching you?
Yes.
Okay. That could happen.
Sounds good. We appreciate it.
And we had John speak to the American Society of Civil Engineers a few months back, and that was a really handy presentation to hear what was expected.
I'll, to finish that thought, I will check with the program person for the Hammond Rotary to see what the future looks like in the next few weeks.
Okay.
So either he or I will be in contact, I'm sure. So.
Excellent.
Did you just volunteer with him?
No,
Oh, okay.
not yet.
Oh, good. Because I was talking to him.
One of the particular needs that we have is to making sure that we reach out to communities in the city that that we call environmental justice communities. So we're trying to make sure that may not be represented in all organizations. So we want to make sure we've got a broad base of organizations. If we can have some assistance or recommendations on groups that we can meet with that meet a broad representation of communities that may be underrepresented at some of the bigger organizations, we appreciate that.
As a general question to that end, do you have Spanish speakers available?
We certainly do.
Okay.
The nice thing about Rotary, lunch is included, so.
I'll even volunteer for that one.
Maybe I shouldn't have showed my hand.
Do I hear dinner? There we go. Yeah.
Are we invited?
Hey? You never know. Any further comment from the board? If not, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to agenda items. The next item is CP-17-03, petition of Butkus Development for approval of a one-lot subdivision called Luke's 169th Kennedy Second Edition, located at 6857 Kennedy Avenue, which is zoned C-4, General Commercial District within the city of Hammond. Have the proper notifications been sent out and received?
Yes, they have.
They have? Thank you. And our petitioner is signing in.
Good evening. I'm Dan Tersman. I'm with Butkus Development, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Luke Land LLC to present a plat of subdivision for the property at 6857 Kennedy Avenue. Luke Land currently owns the property and has future plans to redevelop the site for potential retail, multi-tenant use. And in that vein, the existing parcel is currently in acreage format, and so this petition is simply clerical to update the plat to the current subdivision format. There are no changes to the existing utility easements or right-of-way. However, there is just a clarification or rededication of, with document numbers for a prior right-of-way take that was done by the city under the previous ownership. So with that being said, I'd like to respectfully request preliminary and final approval of the plat of subdivision that we've submitted.
Any questions from board members?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Button?
I'm sure Brian had sent engineering a copy of this plan, and I regret that I didn't respond to his request. Generally, in a plat of survey, we see the measurements and distances for the callouts for each of these, and I didn't really see that in the final plan.
Call us for what, I'm sorry?
For lines and distances, that they're spelled out in the legal description, but when you try to match what's in the legal description with what's on the figure, it's not entirely explicit. Is there any way we could get those lines and bearings and distances shown on the plat?
Well, on the plat, they are shown on the periphery of the parcels. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
So, particularly, I apologize for bringing this up so late. It talks about a line measuring 130 feet in parcel 1, but yet there's no line on the north line of 169th that on the figure that shows 130 feet measuring, nor is there a line that shows a 97.54 feet measuring. It's not shown on the figure. Is there any way that we can get the figure amended to include the bearings and distances on them so it's clear between the legal description and the figure?
Go ahead, Mr. Button, you're talking about parcel 1?
For example, parcel 1.
That's, I agree with Mr. Button.
It's,
Would you want because the new plat would be essentially replacing the existing, so in other words, parcel 1 becomes, it's the legal description of the current parcel. However, with this new plat, then that would become then part of the overall. So in other words, the overall boundaries, I believe, are all identified with distances and
In the legal
bearings.
description, they are measured, but
Right.
it's not clear on the figure
Okay.
what those bearings and distances are.
Right.
So it's tough to justify the two.
Gotcha.
the,
Is this a convention that's typically done?
yeah, because the new boundaries and bearings is what's going to supersede and replace what the parcel 1, 2, and 3 descriptions are. So usually what happens, and I think that would potentially solve your question, is the Alta survey is usually recorded or can be recorded with the plat, so you have something in the public record that bridges the transition.
But the Alta survey doesn't have the bearings or distances on the part. Is the existing parcel divided, is the existing property divided already by the existing parcels 1, 2, and 3?
Not from a.
You are,
It's one parcel.
you are subdividing into 3 parcels.
No, it's.
It's previously been subdivided by 3
The
parcels.
legal description, the parent legal descriptions, for whatever reason, historically describe the 3 parcels. As far as how it's treated, it's a single key number,
It's a single key number, correct?
and so it is treated as if it is a single parcel. So all this is doing is translating it into its new final form, that it's no longer going to have this long legal description of this bearing, that bearing. That's going to be replaced by it's lot one of Luke's addition. And with the correlation of these points, a surveyor could find this on the plan, basically.
Well, generally, you see in a subdivision, points showing the bearings and distances between those points, and that's not shown on this plan.
But if you, of the old, of your parent parcels, they're not necessarily described in that level of detail, because it starts to imply that it has meaning that it will no longer have anymore, because this will replace those. As long as they can find the point of beginning and find all this, that's the important part, because it's the new bearings and the new distances is what's going to now rule. The other ones are going to go away.
I
Mr.
think,
Westland?
I think you're right if you had one lot going to three. Here I have three now combining to make one. So you do have your distances for the one that survives. I've seen it where if I'm taking a big piece of property and now dividing it into 3 lots, then yeah, you have to have that on there, because how would you know? But here I have 3 lots technically, and I'm combining them into one lot. So this is going to be known as lot 1 of the whatever, and you have the distances of the large piece, which is what, after tonight, assuming this gets approved, is all you're ever going to want.
So what's the purpose of showing the individual parcels? Why wouldn't we just show the entire?
You have to make
The existing legal description includes the 3 parcels.
Right.
So in order to graphically identify the existing, or the
You have 3 lots, 3 smaller parcels in acreage right now. So to be able to say, hey, these 3 smaller lots are now going to be known as lot 1 of the blah, blah, blah subdivision, you've got to be able to say, what are those 3 lots? What do they consist of? And the only way to do it is, because this was acreage before, is you wind up with this lengthy legal describing those 3. You don't seem convinced.
I was just gonna say, he doesn't look convinced.
No, that was not a good argument, apparently.
Mr. Hutton?
If I may, can we get parcel 1, the dimensions and the bearings?
certainly from our standpoint, that's, yeah,
that
whatever
okay?
format you
It's
would
not-
like it in.
It's
so.
not something that we normally show on a plat. You're asking to add information that we don't normally show on the plat, and if that is what you're concerned, then I would say record the Alta survey, because it's there.
It's not on the Alta survey.
Then we'll have to make sure it's on the Alta survey.
Is your intent to have one parcel when you're done?
Yes.
Not to have 3 individual parcels?
Correct.
Right, that's why.
And why wouldn't we just do a meets and bounds of the original parcel with the description that it's the right-of-way take has been accepted from the previous document?
Because our subdivision ordinance says we need to convert it to the acreage format into a Lot 1 subdivision name format to be a properly subdivided parcel.
So the end result is Lot 1.
That's right.
I don't
What-
recall seeing on the plat the bearings and distances as it relates to just Lot 1. Wouldn't that be appropriate?
On the plat, they
You do.
are.
But it's not written out as a legal description.
It's not, because your legal, instead of being this gobbledygook that only like, no offense, engineering types understand,
For certain.
it turns into lot 1 of the blah, blah, blah subdivision as the legal is shortened down to 1 line. So now someone goes, well, what's that?
Yeah.
And they go to that.
I accept that.
It becomes gobbledygook that attorneys accept.
No, well, I mean, it makes sense now in the long run what you're trying to do, because at some point, this laborious legal description goes away and you're left with just the outline of the lot that you're trying to subdivide.
And I think in theory, for simplicity, years from now, he's got a 3 unit, but one building, 3-unit retail, and they say, well, what's the legal of that? Well, that's lot one of the.
With the appropriate bearings and distances.
Right.
For lot one. I
That's
accept that. Thank you. Sorry to drag us through.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
Should have been done prior to this meeting.
No problem. Mr. Hutton, any comment?
I'm good.
You're good. I think we're all good, Dan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think we all learned something there.
Clear as mud.
Any further questions? If not, we'll open up the public hearing portion. And seeing no public, I'm not sure we're going to have a public hearing. But again, I'll open up the public hearing portion of this presentation. There being none, I'll close the public hearing. I'll ask again, any questions, final questions? We've satisfied Mr. Hutton and Mr. Button, thankfully. And I would ask now that staff please present the staff report.
Mr. Tursman pretty much captured everything that's in my report. Just to call out for for the record, the new lot is 0.57 acres approximately, and that does meet the minimum lot size requirement in the C4 district. And then the other important thing is that the address will not change on that's currently associated with the parcel. Staff has sent out the plat for agency review. Not all the agencies responded, but the ones that responded had no objections. Staff recommends that the Plan Commission grant preliminary and final approval of the subdivision plat, and if the Plan Commission agrees, then staff requests that the Plan Commission adopt the staff report as its findings of fact.
Any questions of staff in regards to the staff report? Questions or concerns? If not, I think we could entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
I move that we recommend favorable approval for the preliminary and final plat to the city council.
No, it doesn't go to the city council.
Beg your pardon.
It's the final decision of the plan.
Final decision of the plan commission.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Second.
a second, thank you. And roll call.
Roger Brock,
Yes.
Dean Button,
Yes.
Nathaniel Harris,
Yes.
Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton,
Yes.
Juan Moreno,
Yes.
Kimberly White,
Yes.
Thomas White,
Yes.
Janet Benez,
Yes.
9 ayes, 0 nays, 0 abstentions, motion passed.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Button,
I'd like to adopt the staff report as finding of fact.
would we please have a second?
Second.
Okay. I don't know who was first there.
Quick.
Roll call, please.
Roger Brock,
Yes.
Dean Button,
Yes.
Nathaniel Harris,
Yes.
Ann Herbert,
Yes.
William Hutton,
Yes.
Juan Moreno,
Yes.
Kimberly White,
Yes.
Thomas White,
Yes.
Janet Benez,
Yes.
9 ayes, 0 nays, 0 abstentions, motion passed.
Looks like you're all set there, Dan. Next item is, on the agenda is CP-17-04. Petition of the Hammond Plan Commission to amend the text of the zoning ordinance number 8514, replacing it, by replacing Title 21 signs in its entirety. Mr. Poland.
Hello. As you can see, the document you have is in a draft form, and I don't normally give you a document in draft form. So, kind of stepping back in the history of this, last fall we had talked about making an amendment to 2 sections of the sign ordinance. for temporary signs, and through a lot, went through the city council process, the council determined that they were not going to accept that document, and therefore it was defeated, and kind of put us in a position of having to rethink the entire title, the chapter of the zoning ordinance that governs signs. I think in my conversations last fall, I had talked about that there was this Supreme Court ruling on how we deal with signs, and any of the language that, in essence, if you have to read the sign in order to determine what type of sign is, that becomes content-based, and that was against the court ruling, unless you can demonstrate there is a public reason, thought process behind it, that you can define a sign in a certain way. It's all about the First Amendment rights versus commercial speech, and all the little complexities of how one defines that. So what I've tried to do is tackle the whole ordinance and eliminate through definitions, eliminate through various sections, words like identification sign, directory sign, and just think about what is a sign for how much square footage it is, how tall it is, and how you calculate that square footage. Certain things in there about the placement on the building. Those are the things that we can address. So I would like to say, or look at you and say that you've all read it and you thoroughly understand it, and I think that I would have a hard time even myself explaining some of these things, because I get very confused. You will see some notations in there about needs further review. You will see question marks. You will see red. You will see black. I think there's some yellow in there, and I think there's some blue. The only colors, or the only thing that's significant in that color issue, is the black is the existing language, and anything that's a color is something that's new. One of the things that I tried to put in here is, I kind of, shall I say, borrowed from another community's ordinance, is their graphic representations. I think that was one of the things that, from a staff administration standpoint, to help us clarify how we're going to calculate the square footage of a sign. It's on page 5 where you start to see that particular graphic. Under the difference between a panel sign or a wall-mounted sign as opposed to channel letters, and how we would calculate the square footage. When I borrowed it from this other community, one of the things that I did change, and this is kind of going back to, I guess, high school geometry. When you have a triangle sign, they did the calculation of height times length, and that would basically you're saying that the triangle is a square, and that would not be correct. And so there's a notation that it's 1/2 height times length, because that is the true calculation of a triangle. Circle, pi r squared, everybody should remember that from high school. When it comes to the irregular shape, I don't know how to really calculate the square footage of a hexagon unless you're going to divide it up into 6 triangles and do all sorts of crazy things like that. So that one is treated as if it was a square. The oval sign also, because the formula for calculating this area of an oval is a little something you have to know, in the radiuses and the difference between the 2 radiuses. So that one became a square. The sections that were in the amendment from last year are put back in here with some modifications, and also some, that's where some of the needs confirmation, needs further review starts to come in, because we didn't answer all the questions. I did finally find another graphic for the T-frame sign, and that's showing up in this document. One of the important things that I clarified in the definitions is that we now have a definition for permanent signs versus temporary signs. That term permanent really means it's meant to be there forever for a continuing unspecified period of time. A temporary sign meaning it's there just for a short duration of time. And it does get into whether or not a permanent sign's more on a foundation and a temporary sign may not be on a foundation. So it becomes a construction component. And those are kind of neutral things you can look at in making those distinctions as to whether it's permanent or temporary. So that being said, what I would like you to do is take the time to read it. I want you to give me feedback on what does or does not make sense. We have set up a meeting with Dave and Kevin Smith for next week to kind of get into some of the more in-depth issues, where all the question marks are, where all the need further review comments are. For example, I still have the existing language of a real estate sign, and I'm really not sure how to handle a real estate sign, because once you say it's a real estate sign, that means you're looking at its content, and that's what you're not supposed to do. But how is that sign a temporary sign when it comes to the time frame that we're allowed for temporary signs, where you only have a temporary sign for 30 days, got to come down for 30 days, and then go back up for another 30 days, because real estate signs may be there for 6 months. So it becomes a question of how we're really going to handle that, and I don't know what the answer is right at the moment. Yes, Mr. Hutton.
The 30 days, is that for an entire 365-day year? Or?
Yeah, within the calendar year.
Okay.
Temporary sign, 30 days up, down for 30 days, then you can have it for another 30 days.
I'm sorry, say that again.
You can put a temporary sign up for 30 days.
Right.
Got to come down for a 30-day period, and then you could put it up at some time within the calendar year for another 30-day period.
Okay. And then my other question is there anything, there's a lot of stuff in here. Is there anything in there that determines a minimum distance from a intersection or a corner that might block automobile?
We have existing well, number one, this is not discussing anything within the right-of-way, so this is always on private property.
Okay.
And the private property is governed by the vision clearance triangle, which is elsewhere in the ordinance.
Thank you.
On the
There are some private property lines that are pretty close to some major streets.
Yeah, I know, and hopefully,
So what happens to that triangle? Does it get reduced?
No, the triangle doesn't get reduced. I think the question becomes, without knowing the specific example if you're talking about in the history of it, my question is going to be, how long has that sign been there? Was it permitted properly? Is it legal non-conforming? And that's one of the difficult things of signage, is really knowing when it was there. And so what we're hoping to do is write an ordinance that is clearer for code enforcement to enforce, but they are going to have to struggle with that pre-existing legal non-conforming concept. That's going to be definitely a tough one from a practical basis.
Thank you.
Brian, you're mentioning you would like us to read this in depth, get back to you, and that time span again was? Our meeting is what, next Wednesday?
Yeah.
I would like to have it before next Wednesday. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, if not for the rest of the board, at least for myself.
Yeah, because what I am hoping that we will come back in April for final adoption, if we're ready for it. I think there's definitely a lot of detail, and I tell you that I don't think I can I don't think anybody can answer every possible scenario of a sign, but, you know, if we obviously, that's true with any zoning rule, you can't cover every possible permutation of it, but if we have a good foundation and good interpretation, consistent interpretation, good enforcement, we'll do the best that we can.
Just out of curiosity, who has the final interpretation on this?
Well, from a permitting standpoint, very clearly, the zoning administrator is going to be looking at this on a daily basis. You know, it is what at this point is happening, and I think when it comes to the feather or the blade signs, they're just popping up all over the place, and they're not getting permits. We're not really regulating those because, to some extent, our current language doesn't really address it. So that's one of the things that we're trying to accomplish here is we're now addressing those blade signs or feather signs as temporary signs, and they can only be there for that specified 30-day on, 30-day off period of time. So they need to be coming down. And then that now becomes an enforcement question of hopefully they've come in for their permit so we can track it. And, you know, not that we're going to, you know, be there at 12:01 in the morning and on the 30th day and say, your sign's not down yet, but I think reasonably speaking, if it's there for 45 days, something's going to be done through code enforcement.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Button?
Prohibited signs is listed as a new section in here.
Say that.
Prohibited signs is red and therefore new. We haven't had prohibited signs before.
We did, and that gets, okay, good point. No, fair point. It's just.
But I have a follow-up after what
Yeah,
you.
there was a section of prohibited signs. I think when I cut and pasted it, some of that, actually, I'm sorry, on page 7, the strike-through shows the current language of prohibited signs. Even though it's red and it should be black with strike-through, that might be more of a word processing problem I had. But the new 21.10 is, because it's underlined, it's red, that's what I'm trying to accomplish.
Your pardon.
Except where it says review further, those are the unanswered questions.
Is someone determined what signs are out there now that would be considered prohibited under the new ordinance?
As far as like an inventory?
Yeah, has somebody accounted for those one? I mean, are we going to have a sign that's out in the public now that it's been there for many years, and now it becomes a prohibited sign, and now we're forced to tell the person who's had their sign on their building for 20 years that they have to take it down because it's now becomes a prohibited sign?
I don't think
It becomes a legal non-conforming use.
Right.
So it's okay to leave the sign up?
Until it becomes destroyed, dilapidated, under the provision, and I'd have to look specific, I mean, it's been a little bit since I read through this, but there are different criteria for when they would have to come down. But if they, theoretically, you could maintain a legal non-conforming use forever, as long as it's in good condition, you're using it, and nothing happens to it. It's part of the no ex post facto law thing, right? Where you can't say, yeah, you spent all this money and made this investment, and yesterday it was legal, but today it's not, so take it down.
Okay.
There is a concept of amortization when it applies to signs, and that gets really challenging, is that, and I can't say that nobody does it in Indiana, but I think there's some part of the statute that discourages that concept very strongly. But amortization, you can say that a legal non-conforming sign, you have 2 years to make it, conforming, or 1 year, or whatever the time period is. One of the provisions that came out a couple of years ago in the statute was that through the permit review process, let's say someone has an existing sign, you have to be really careful about saying that the city won't issue a permit unless you take down this old sign. And there's some protection for the property owner that's in the statute, so we have to really be careful about how we approach that.
Okay.
I want to back up. Legal non-conforming.
That's right. Essentially, it was legal when you did it,
right?
and now it's not conforming to the current law.
But we can keep it.
You can keep it because it was legal at the time, unless one of the criteria, like, let's say somebody hits it with a car and knocks it over.
And you have to replace it.
Yeah, but now you're gonna replace it with something that's conforming. For instance, and it happens all the time in a greater zoning context where I had a use which was permitted, which was X, retail use. And then the zoning code changes, and now you can't do that retail use at that site. But you can continue doing it as a legal, non-conforming use, but then let's say that the structure is destroyed by fire. Now you've got to conform to the current zoning code.
That makes
Same-
sense.
Same concept. You have a sign that you put up there that is legal at the time. Right?
Right.
And the zone, and we then adopt this ordinance which makes it illegal. But it was legal when you did it. And I can't take a statute and apply it back in time to when you did it. So therefore, you're legal, but you're non-conforming to the current law.
Got it.
But you're legal.
Thank you.
So as long as you maintain your sign, Mr. Hutton, you'll be okay.
As long as it doesn't fall down.
Stop it. You did a good job.
Thank you, until you read it and find something wrong with it. I have nothing further.
So no other action at this point? Or?
No, this was just introducing it. I just think the complexity of it warranted more than just me throwing at you coldly. And
Certainly a lot there.
yeah, and that's why I want you to absorb it and think about it and get back to me.
And you're saying by next week, Wednesday?
That would be ideal, yes.
So we can email it to you, or?
Certainly email it to me, that's fine.
Are political signs in there?
Don't I wish?
We, Mr. Westland can correct me if I'm wrong, we cannot refer to them as political signs because that would be, you would have to read it to know it's a political sign, therefore it's content-based, which you're not supposed to do. Presumably, those signs would be classified under the temporary signs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I see in here, it also talks about signage on fences.
Yes, we are
Prohibited.
aware that there are circumstances in which signs are located on fences. What we're trying to say is that you can't do that anymore.
So Acorn Fence Company can't put that little sign on the fence.
Technically, they shouldn't be anyway, but that would be something that, yes, we should not be having that. Not that we want to pick on that particular contractor or another contractor.
How did,
But they
stop
do,
it.
But they do it.
All contractors do it. I think generally, though, the subject of signs for construction purposes, and I'm wordsmithing, I think that needs, and I tried to address that to some extent because the 30-day on and off time period doesn't work if you have a construction project that lasts 6 months or a year. And what signs do you want to have while they're constructing a building? You're going to have a myriad of signs of, do not enter and truck traffic here that you need to manage a construction site. But if you have to take that down for 30 days, but you're still building the building, that doesn't make sense. So that is one of the questions that I don't have 100% resolved.
Any other questions, concerns? Okay. Thank you, Brian. I'll let Brian sit down. Any correspondence?
No correspondence.
Commissioners' comments? Hearing none, we'll move on. Staff comments?
Just as a general question, was the presentation by Nick D something worthwhile? Did that help people?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, I've been involved with it, pretty regularly over the last several months, and half a year probably. And yeah, I mean, I felt too that it was useful and worthwhile, and we would expect future progress
Yeah,
reports.
I wanted them to be brief, and I knew it was going to drag on or go on longer.
So there's just too much,
Yeah. I
too much
told-
in the topic.
It's difficult. It's a very complicated subject. I did tell them 15 minutes. I knew it was going to be longer than that. So, but I wanted to set the tone.
I personally thought it was fine. No public comment? I guess we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all.